Isle of Dogs movie review. So this is one of those movies that I've been wanting to see. I wanted to see it when it was in theaters. Wasn't able to get around to it, but I always thought the trailer looked really funny and the premise seemed really cool. And I've always enjoyed Wes Anderson. But yeah, wasn't able to see it when it was in theaters, and then was just kind of waiting for an opportunity to see it, and then it was on TV tonight, and so lucky me, I watched the movie, and then here I am with my hot take. Hot take for me. I know this movie's been out for like a while now for everyone else. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really like Wes Anderson. I guess most people really like Wes Anderson, so that doesn't make me unique. I find him quite funny. I do find that some of his films are just kind of non-stop funny from beginning to end. And some of his films have funny moments on them, but they also have kind of some more emotional story beats that move a little slower for me. I like them all, but my preferences are for the ones that are funny all the way through. This movie had some very funny moments. I love that Wes Anderson deadpan humor. I love Bill Murray every time he's in a Wes Anderson film. But aside from having some very funny moments, there were just parts of this movie were a little bit slow. So I liked it on the whole, but wasn't my favorite Wes Anderson film. I think my favorite Wes Anderson film, actually I haven't seen everything he's done at this point, but among the ones I've seen would be The Grand Budapest Hotel. That film was just funny from start to finish. Yeah, this film had me a little restless at points. There were some points I was kind of a little bit, getting a little bit impatient with, which is actually not unusual for me. There is a number of Wes Anderson films where I get a little bit impatient at certain points kind of in the middle. But yeah, this film was set in Japan, which was interesting. Now, I don't really know a lot about cinema or cinema history or something like that, but I have friends who do. One of my friends who was really into cinema, studied film at university, all this stuff, was really into this Japanese film director called Ozu. And he actually showed me a number of Ozu films. I think we watched 3 of them or 4 of them together. Yeah, if you get a chance to watch these films, they're interesting. They're a bit slower paced, but they're interesting. Ozu had like this obsession with setting up symmetry in every shot, or almost every shot. Just kind of a very perfectionist filmmaker, just kind of meticulously set up all his shots. And apparently, at least according to my friend the cinema nerd, Ozu had a big influence on Wes Anderson. I can't find this stated anywhere explicitly. Like, I can't find any interview of Wes Anderson where he said, oh, by the way, I'm stealing everything from Ozu. But yeah, this seems to be the opinion of a few people who are into kind of cinema history and stuff like this. So, to have this film kind of set in Japan seems to make a fair degree of sense, with Wes Anderson kind of setting up all these symmetry in his shots. The Japanese setting makes sense because Japanese filmmakers like Ozu were kind of obsessive about doing this as well. So that Japanese setting works quite well with the Wes Anderson film technique. And a number of people have already commented on this, but the language barrier aspect of it kind of comes through with the Japanese, right? The fact that the dogs can't understand what the humans are saying kind of makes it come clearer for an American audience because it's all in Japanese anyways. Obviously, it's not going to work as well with the Japanese audience. I myself, actually, I talk about this occasionally on this channel. I used to live in Japan. I spent 8 years in Japan, studied Japanese. I never became completely fluent, but I reached about an upper intermediate level of Japanese. It's a bit rusty now because I've allowed myself to get out of practice. But point being, I know this is of interest to nobody except me. I actually understood some of the Japanese. Not everything perfectly, but the majority of it, most of it, bits and pieces here and there, depending on the scene and depending on how fast they were talking and stuff like that. So I guess that gives me an advantage, or maybe a disadvantage, depending on how you look at it, because it meant I wasn't able to experience the language barrier as much as somebody else might have, and that was apparently part of the intention. Yeah, and this is probably of interest to nobody else except me, but I recognize the Japanese song that was playing in the back of that izakaya when that one scene when she goes in to confront the scientist. Tokyo Shoeshine Boy. It's an old song from the 1950s, but when I was in Japan, you know, I've always been interested in retro stuff, so I sought out a lot of old Japanese music, and at one point, I had that in my CD collection. It was part of a compilation. It was like the greatest hits from the 1950s. But yeah, I was like, I remember listening to that song when I used to have an apartment in Japan. Memories. Okay. Oh, right. I guess speaking of Japan, the other thing which I was just on the internet just now and checking this out. Is some people have criticized the fact that this movie was set in Japan, but then there's an American exchange student who kind of takes center stage, so it's apparently like the white savior complex. The thought did occur to me when I was watching the movie. It also occurred to me, I mean, I know this is just a stupid movie, but anyone who's spent any time in Japan knows that Japanese do not react well to foreigners meddling in their domestic politics. So the fact that she was kind of tolerated as far as she was, kind of thrusting her nose into this kind of Japanese domestic politics, kind of made me struggle to suspend my disbelief, right? Like I know it's just a movie and you're supposed to give it's some space, and you're like supposed to say, okay, you have to suspend your disbelief when you watch this. I struggled a little bit with this. I mean, sure, at the end they did revoke her visa and kind of send her back to America. I'm surprised she got away with it for as long as she did before they sent her back to America, or threatened to. But that's just kind of me kind of applying like a realist lens to this. In terms of like, is this a white savior complex in terms of like the Americans making this movie? I thought predominantly it was just Wes Anderson being silly. And it was just kind of silly to have this American exchange student just kind of spearhead this student movement. I thought that's what Tony was going for. It's just kind of, isn't this silly that this American girl is getting involved in it? But yeah, I guess if you could read it as a white savior complex. I thought it was just Wes Anderson being silly myself. Yeah, what else do I have to say about this? Not that much. Love the voice actors in this. Ed Norton did a great job. Bill Murray did a great job as always. Jeff Goldblum and Bryan Cranston, how do you say his name? Were in this as well. My favorites were Ed Norton and Bill Murray. They just kind of voiced Wes Anderson characters so well. Yeah, there were some slow parts in here where I was kind of losing patience or getting a little bit restless with the movie. But the parts that were funny, this is what I always come away with from a Wes Anderson movie. Okay, it got a little bit slow in points. Wes Anderson movies also will have a tendency to sentimentality that I'm like, I've got limited patience for. This movie had that a bit. But then there's that funny deadpan humor that always gets me, like when they open up the cage, they're like, dogs are saying, none of us ever figured out how to open up the cage. And then the boy just picks out his key and opens it up. And they're like, ah, a key. Yeah, sorry, it's not funny when I do it, is it? But it's funny when Bill Murray does it. Or when they're on the cable cars. And he's like, all right, we're going to rendezvous at this point. And the guy's like, you're not the leader. And he's like, what? He's like, you're not the leader. We have to vote on it. And that scene as well just cracked me up. And that's always the thing when I come away from a Wes Anderson movie. Sure, the sentimentality is a little bit overdone. Sure, it moves a little bit slow in spots. But that deadpan humor, when it's there, it's just brilliant. And all you need is like a few different scenes like that, a few different kind of brilliant moments of deadpan humor, and all of their sins are forgiven. And I come away from the movie just kind of chuckling about the parts that I thought were funny. So, yeah, not my absolute favorite Wes Anderson film. I think my absolute favorite Wes Anderson film was The Budapest Hotel, which I gave a solid 10 out of 10 to. This is maybe more of a 7 out of 10, but still worth checking out.